In this lesson, we're going to be going over how to create identifiers in classes. So far in our current method of styling with CSS, we're going to run into a problem. For example, let's take two paragraphs. So we're going to make two paragraphs. And let's make another one. Alright, so we created two paragraphs. But let's go ahead and style them. So the way we usually style them is we select the selector, which is our tag name, and we do a curly brace, and let's say we want to change the color to white. No, let's not do that. Let's change the color to blue. So let's do color is blue. Now, we're going to run into a problem because we have two paragraphs and only one selector. So when we run this, we're going to get two paragraphs that come out blue. As you can see, we get two paragraphs that come out blue. But let's say we wanted this paragraph to be green and this one to be blue. How do we select one of them, but then not select the other one and keep this one blue? Now that's what identifiers in classes solve for us. So identifiers in classes are exactly the same thing. They help us identify certain tags among the others. So the only difference between identifiers in classes is that identifiers will only work for one element, whereas classes can work for multiple. For example, let's create an identifier. So the way we do this is we add an attribute to the tag, and we call it ID, so for identifier, equals, and in quotation marks we write the identifier name that we want to give it to. So let's call this one first. So we close it off with another quotation mark, and now we just assigned this paragraph a unique identifier called first. Now we cannot use this identifier anywhere else throughout this entire HTML document because it's an identifier. The only thing we can do is we can style just this paragraph by itself using the identifier first. But if we wanted to have multiple of these paragraphs using the same styling rule, we can use a class. So the way we do this is let's go into the second paragraph and add an attribute called class equals, and in quotation marks we call the class name. For example, class equals second. So now we have an identifier called first and a class called second. Now let's go ahead and make a third paragraph. So we have another third paragraph called hey, I'm a third paragraph. Now let's say we wanted to add the same styling as, so now we have a third paragraph. Now if we wanted the same styling as this one onto this one, we can't just go in here and say ID equals first. We can't do that because this is an identifier and it will only show up once in an HTML document. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to change this to a class and set this one to the same class. So let's take, for example, the second paragraph that we have. Let's say we want the style for this second paragraph to equally match the third paragraph. We'd go into here and let's remove this identifier, and we can add class equals, in quotation marks, second. Now with classes, we're allowed to have multiple show up throughout the HTML document. So whatever style we do to this class is going to show up for this class. Now this is going to be really helpful whenever we want to separate the different stylings that we're going to use throughout our website. So let's go ahead and show how these work inside of a CSS document. So we're going to first use an identifier, and then next we're going to style the second and the third paragraph together. So let's go over here and let's delete everything we have so far. So the way the selector works for an identifier is we use a pound symbol and then we use the identifier's name. So if we go back, we see we set the identifier name to first. So we're going to write pound first. And now we can add a curly brace and start styling this identifier paragraph. Now class almost works exactly the same thing, except instead of using a pound symbol, we're going to use a dot or a period. So we're going to do period, and then we're going to put the class name. So the class name for this one is called second, and we're just going to put period second. And then we can put up a curly brace and start styling this class. So let's go over there and start styling a little bit. So let's call this one a color of blue. So we set the identifier as color of blue, so this paragraph is going to show up blue. But let's set the class color to be red. Now what this will do is it'll look for anything that has the class of second. So we have a class of second on this paragraph, and we have a class of second on this paragraph. So it's going to turn both these paragraphs and style it with the color of red. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's go look at what that looks like. So as you can see, we have only this paragraph showing up in blue, and the rest of the two in the second and the third paragraph showing up as red. So we're going to be using classes and identifiers really heavily when styling, because we want to give some elements and some tags certain stylings while others remain different. If we look back to when we were learning HTML, we learned about divisions, so divs, and we also learned about spans. Now these don't do anything on our HTML document, they're complete blank, but it's going to allow us to structure our document and style it into the way we want it. For example, we can give this division an identifier, which we're going to most likely want to do, and we're going to call this first. And we'll also might as well call this span an identifier, so we're going to give it an ID, and we might as well call it second. Let's close off that span. So as you can see, we can divide up our structure of our HTML document, and we can start styling sectionally. So this would be a section, and we can have another division where we can style that section separately. It's going to allow us to structure and style our document one section at a time, allowing us to give different rules and different colors and styles to different sections of our website. It's going to become really helpful for us when we're doing really big websites where we need to style different parts of the website differently. So that was everything you need to know about identifiers and classes. Stay tuned for the next lesson.